for each looping. You can feed a data set from just about any data source, including SharePoint lists and libraries, databases, CSV files, you name it, into a for each loop. And for each row in your data set, the column values becomes variables. You can then use the variables to construct URLs, UNC, metadata, filters, you name it. Let's have a look. This is the for each loop step class in migration flow for SharePoint. But before I dive into that, let's have a look at the end result first. All right, so in this example, I'm reading a CSV file. And for each row in the CSV file, I'm using a couple of columns to construct the UNC and the URL to copy some files. Notice that I also, in between, put in a group step to combine multiple steps that I want to run for each row. Now, I also made a different approach where I'm reading a SharePoint list, and for each item in the SharePoint list, I'm doing exactly the same. Now, you can see when I click on this one here, you can see it's actually referenced from two different places. So I can either run this one or this one. All right, so let's have a look at the first one where we're reading from a CSV file. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just referencing a CSV file that I call my list. If you quickly have a peek at what's in there, you can see it's got some rows in there, a site and a title. And I'm going to use the relative site address to reference the site where I want to put the files. And I'm going to use the title to find the files in my file share. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. All right, so before we do that, let's just have a quick peek at what's in that file from the perspective of migration flow. So I'll just click the data grid column up here and have a quick peek. And these are the files. There were more rows than that, right? And that's because I added a filter, which leads me to just quickly explain that you can have any kind of filter on a CSV file. You can also have the different data types specified so that you can actually change the data type or to any data type, including decimal and including date and time, and do filtering on the CSV file on that. So in this example, I'm just retrieving the rows in the CSV file where the title column begins with an A. All right. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to call the step that groups multiple steps together. If I want to have a quick peek at the call hierarchy, you can see I'm calling this step. So I'm just going to quickly go there. You can see this step copies the files and then does something else, which is relevant for this demo. Now, if I look at the call tree now, you can see it's being shorter. So let's go to the copy files. And the copy file step is basically retrieving files from this location and then putting it into SharePoint at this location. Notice that I'm going to use the site information from the file as part of the URL, and then I'm hard coding the documents. Let's go ahead and see what's in the file share. And I'm going to open that folder. Coming up over here, this is my folder, and I got American Bikes, Allison Cycles, blah, blah, blah. Those were the names in the title column in my CSV file, or for that matter, in my SharePoint list. Let's walk through the flow and analyze each step. First, I'll go back to the for each, where I'm reading the data. We already went over the fact that you can filter the for each or the SharePoint list or database or whatever input you have, and then calling this step. Now, let's go ahead and do this step by step so you can visually see exactly what data is being retrieved and how it's being used. I can now run the job, and I can run the job with preview or just silently, right? With preview, I will see what's coming in, and silently, like the word implies, it will just run in the background. Now, but for now, I will just run it by loading the variables so that we can analyze each step in the flow setup. I'm going to say load the variables. And those were the rows from the CSV file that we selected. Notice that they all begin with an A. Just going to take one of them. Let's take this one here and say load variables. Now, as you can see in the job log here, these variables were loaded. The sites, W demo, company 3, and Allison's cycles. All right. So if you look at the variables now, I'll just bring up the variables here and say site, here we go. So you see that's the value of that variable. And also if you look at the title, you can see that's Allison's cycles. Okay. Now we got the variables loaded for one row, so we can simulate what's going to happen for each of the rows. Let's go back to the home and then select the next step. This is the step that's being called. I can either click it here or I can see it in the call tree. But for now, I'll just click it here. You can see the next thing that's going to happen is going to copy some files. So I'm going to open that. And now if I right click here, you'll see what will this UNC evaluate to. So I'm going to right click and notice that Allison cycles has been inserted. So this part of it is hard-coded and this is dynamic. All right, so you can see in the destination, the URL being constructed will then read like this, right? And you can see the sites WP demo company 3 has been inserted into the URL. Let me just open this and just have a quick peek at what's inside there. It's just an empty document library. And you can see this part here was the part that came from my CSV file. All right. Okay, so now I can run the file transfer step alone and see how's it going to react. I'm just going to run that with preview or silently. And in preview, I will see exactly what's it going to copy and what's going to happen with those files it's going to copy. I'm going to run it. And here we go. There's one file in that directory that should be copied. And I can then say, next, where will I copy that? Notice that the Allison bicycles here is part of the source for that specific file. And next, it will load the SharePoint site and figure out if that file is in fact there or not. And it's not there, so it's going to create it. Notice you can see the URL here, and that's the one being generated. So I could run it and see the result. I could just cancel it because now I know exactly what's it going to do, and I'm happy with that. Did I say happy? Well, I'm not exactly happy. I want to do some extra stuff just to make it a little more fun. Let's go back to the Home tab and look at some data transformation. I got the title column here and it's blank, right? I can assign anything to it, but I could also create a transformation. So I'm going to create a transformation here. I'm going to say, paste in a variable. I'm going to take the size of the file. And I'm going to say plus hello is the size. I know that this might not be very, very advanced, but it pretty much shows you what you can do. And then say string of that, because that's a numeric value. Just say string of that, and just give it a plus here. Notice that you can right click here and you can see all the different functions you can use, either logical, string, numeric, date and time, all kinds of data time, file handling, and so on. Now I could, concatenate multiple columns and do stuff with them. Also, I can add actions here, so I can do data validation. So if the size is greater than this, make a warning or whatever. I can do cascaded expressions, so I can have multiple expressions after one another. I can extract, if there was a JSON or XML stream text, I could then extract the tags. I can map one value to the other in a lookup value, or I can replace occurrences. But this is a complete video in itself, so I'll get back to that later on. All right. So let's say okay to this, and just have a quick preview again. What will it be? We see the same source file, right? And now we see something different. You can see the title column has been added here, and you can see, hello, this is the size, and the size is 43 bytes. Now my step is complete. I'm going to cancel that now. So now I'm ready to run the whole thing, And I could go back here and I could say run. And I can, again, run it with preview or silently. I'm going to run it with preview so we can see what it is. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to do the first 3 here and say run. So now the job runs and I'm free to do whatever I want, as this is asynchronous. Both the job is running asynchronous and the transfer to files to SharePoint is also asynchronous. Notice that the file here has been submitted to the Azure queue. It's not yet been picked up by Azure, but it will be in some time. So migration flow is actually running asynchronously super fast, independently of what SharePoint is doing and how fast SharePoint is running. So now the job has completed, but you can see there's been 2 packages submitted, but none of them have been completed. One of them has been completed now. You can see there's 1 file okay and 2 files pending. So I can say, okay, which files are pending? Meaning not transferred yet. Those 2 files are pending and not transferred yet. Close that. And which file have actually been completed? This one has been completed. Okay. Now you notice that the reporting I just showed you is based on the database, right? Which brings me to a very short introduction to reporting, which is that reporting is consolidated, real time, always up to date. There are no CSV files, like in 0. No Excel files, nothing to look at in any file share and make programs to consolidate and all that stuff. It's all being taken care of. There are multiple methods to do the reporting. The easiest, straightforward one is to click the reporting button right there. And you will have a display of what files have been copied or moved. Now, you can specify various filters. You can specify which job you want to use and also time intervals and so on. Now, this is an interactive thing where you can do reporting interactively, right? That works well for relatively small jobs like a couple of thousands or 25,000 files or something like that. But when it gets more complicated and spans across many days and things like that, and you want to have a consolidated report, there are different methods. I mentioned that the reporting is consolidated, always up to date, and in real time, right? So that kind of implies that the reporting information needs to go into the database, and that's exactly where it is. So let's go and have a look at the reporting database. I'm going to the repository and creating a data ETL, my report. And I'm going to choose the from to be a database table. I'm going to use the internal database. And from within the internal database, I will select the view called Report Migrated Files. And this view gives you everything across all job instances. Every single file has been transferred or attempted to be transferred. So if I just have a quick look at what's inside there, you'll see there are 17 rows in there. Now, some of them are the same because they've been copied multiple times. So I can go and say, okay, give me only the latest instance of a given file copy. So I'm going to say is latest equals to 1, like this. That will give me the latest instance of a file copy. I could put the result into a CSV file. I could put it into an Excel sheet or a table in an Excel sheet, but I can also put it into a database. Now, I can also put it into a SharePoint list. So I can actually have a SharePoint list receiving the reporting information from Migration Flow. Let me just put this into an Excel sheet. My report. Let's go ahead and run this and run it with preview so we can actually see the records. So these are the records. I'm going to say run, and the Excel sheet has been generated. And this is my result. So reporting is database based. Everything is consolidated, always up to date, and in real time. Well, thank you for today.